We all know about the psychopath's enhanced killer instinct, their finely tuned vulnerability antennae, but it may surprise you to know that there are some situations in which psychopaths are actually more adept at saving lives than they are at taking them. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that, okay? Imagine you've got a train and it's hurtling down a track. In its path, 5 people are trapped on the line and cannot escape. Fortunately, you can flick a switch which diverts the train down a fork in that track away from those 5 people, but at a price. There is another person trapped down that fork and the train will kill them instead. Question: should you flick the switch? Now, most people have little trouble deciding what to do under those circumstances. Though the thought of flicking the switch isn't exactly a nice one, the utilitarian choice, as it were, killing just the one person instead of the 5, represents the least worst option, okay? But now let me give you a variation. You've got a train speeding out of control down a track, and it's going to plough into 5 people on the line. But this time you are standing behind a very large stranger on a footbridge above that track. The only way to save the people is to heave the stranger over. He will fall to a certain death, but his considerable bulk will block the train, saving 5 lives. Now we've got what we might call a real dilemma on our hands, okay? While the score in lives is precisely the same as in the first scenario, 5-1, one's choice of action appears far trickier. Now, why should that be? Well, the reason, it turns out, all boils down to temperature, okay? Case 1 represents what we might call an impersonal dilemma. It involves those areas of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the posterior parietal cortex, in particular the anterior paracingulate cortex, the temporal pole, and the superior temporal sulcus, bit of neuroanatomy for you there, primarily responsible for what we call cold empathy, for reasoning and rational thought. Case 2, on the other hand, represents what we might call a personal dilemma. It involves the emotion center of the brain, known as the amygdala, the circuitry of hot empathy, what we might call the feeling of feeling what another person is feeling. Now, psychopaths, just like most normal members of the population, have no trouble at all with case 1. They flick the switch and the train diverts accordingly, killing just the one person instead of the 5. But this is where the plot thickens. Quite unlike normal members of the population, psychopaths also experience little difficulty with case 2. Psychopaths, without a moment's hesitation, are perfectly willing to chuck the fat guy over the rails if that's what the doctor orders. Now, moreover, this difference in behavior has a distinct neural signature. The pattern of brain activation in both normal people and psychopaths is identical on the presentation of the impersonal moral dilemma, but radically different when things start to get a bit more personal. Imagine that I were to hook you up to a brain scanner, a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, and were to present you with those 2 dilemmas, okay? What would I observe as you went about trying to solve them? Well, at the precise moment that the nature of the dilemma switches from impersonal to personal, I would see the emotion center of your brain, your amygdala, and related brain circuits, the medial orbitofrontal cortex, for example, light up like a pinball machine. I would witness the moment, in other words, when emotion puts its money in the slot. But in psychopaths, I would see precisely nothing. And the passage from impersonal to personal would slip by unnoticed, because that emotion neighborhood of their brains, that emotional zip code, has a neural curfew. And that's why they're perfectly happy to chuck that fat guy over the side without even batting an eye.